Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for tuning into the Tourney Podcast once more. I've got a fourth guest for our fourth episode right here. It's going to be Tal from Team Halu. But before we're diving into the conversation here, I want to give you guys a quick recap on, Tal's team in specifically, because Team Halu, of course, has been eliminated from the tourney. So it's a good chance, I think, to start off this episode by talking a little bit about what the team was and wasn't able to accomplish during the event, and then get Tal's opinions on maybe what went on. That's going to be interesting, definitely, because he's got the inside scoop there. So basically, what happened for Team Halu? They didn't start off so hot. Towel came in, actually, when the team was still winless. With him, they managed to get 2 straight wins. They went on a 4-game loss streak after that, actually. They managed to secure 2 more wins in the semifinals, but then that last game, they of course lost, and it led to their elimination. Now, before I wanna talk anything specific, I just got a little fun trivia question for you. Who would you guess was the best player on your team in terms of win rate? What would you guess? Which of your team's players is the one with the best win rate in this tourney?
Highest win rate in the tourney? On my team, right? On
Yeah,
Harley's team?
just your team.
Probably me.
Probably
But
you,
maybe.
GigaChat.
Well, I think they won 1 game and lost 2 or 3 without me.
That sounds logical, right? I mean,
I feel like that probably means that I have the highest win rate.
well, let me tell you. Actually, you've got the exact same win rate as I think both Halu and Riva, funnily. But there's one guy who's got 3 wins and 3 losses, and that's actually the best win rate because you all have 4 wins and 5 losses. And that's SDN, actually, who, with a 50% win rate, is actually, according to my stats, the way I tracked it at least, is the one player on your team with the best win rate. Everybody else has exactly 1 more loss than win. I guess he was just the MVP all along. Unfortunately, he
Did
ended
I
up
really
going.
play 9 games?
It appears to me, unless I made some issues, it looks like, and that's actually what I wanna. That was just, of course, a fun question to open this up with. But what you're saying right there, exactly. It's your team is very interesting in that regard. No other team has such. I don't want to say consistency because there was still constant rotation in your lineups, but basically your team had the best usage rate in terms of players. What I mean is that your top 3 players, like you, Halu, and River, you all have 9 games, and your team in total played 12. So you
Okay.
basically the 3 of you played in 75% of your games, and that's not the case for any other team. Your team still had the worst record though, so I wanna put right. I wanna try and kind of explore this topic with you. What do you think? Because you can't blame, of course, player availability if all your best players played more than the other team's best players. So I wanna get like your honest opinion here. Looking past all the scheduling stuff, of course, in the semifinals. I know you guys technically went out with 2 wins and 2 losses there. So I'm not saying you had a bad tourney at all, but you had the worst record still. So I want to get it from you. Is it the player draft? Did Riva do a bad job? Is it misplays in the game, or do you think it's maybe something like unlucky maps or unlucky CIV picks? What would you say? What cost you guys the tourney overall, or at least what contributed to your record?
Well, about the player usage rate, and this ties into the other thing, we had the shortest roster and the least depth. So pretty much we
Absolutely.
could only go to team if we were using our players. And I don't know if Rico ever actually played a game for us.
He played 1, yes.
Okay, if he played one, it was while I wasn't there, and then Corpse was in 1 game where wasn't result wasn't great. And then I think I maybe played 1 game with Zardoz.
Yes,
And maybe
exactly. You're
one.
exactly right. These 3 players, your bottom 3 players, played 1 game each, and they lost all of those games.
Yeah, so that basically meant that pretty much it was just Reaver, Halu, me, and SDN who were the availability pool.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. So it ended often being Reaver, Halu, and me.
That's
Why did we
absolutely
not go
true.
out in the tournament? Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to say because I feel like 3/4 of the game I played were decided by an early 1v1 in the first 15 minutes.
That's so crazy, right? And that only seems to happen in your team's games too. I don't even know why.
Yes. I don't know. I guess we're just aggro.
Yeah, you're just flipping it every time. I don't know.
I mean, we usually I feel like we usually had the second pick when I was playing, like especially in that last
I
round
see.
versus team was it Team Obi we were playing or was it Anti's team? Yeah, it was Obi's team, and we had the forfeit was in the game where we had the first pick. So that meant in 3 out of the 4 games we played, we had the second pick. So
Yeah.
we kind of let. I feel like the first pick gets the more score-worthy civs, so that leaves the second pick to usually be the more scrappy, aggressive player. But I guess if they choose Aztecs first, then not that case. But
Yeah. I see where you're coming from there actually, and that's a pretty fair argument. Overall in the tourney, it took a while early on to establish like a draft meta, because I don't know if you remember, but at the very start where you weren't playing yet, um, people would always just first pick Celts, and well, it's a very badly kept secret that the Celts are still winless in this tournament. So very early on, the first pick team actually always lost. But then, like recently, of course, with the meta uh, getting kind of not set in stone, but a bit more explored. It's been, yeah, just especially in the playoffs. We've only had one second pick team victory in the playoffs so far. So you're absolutely right there. That is a huge disadvantage, apparently. Or maybe teams are just doing a bad job. I actually want to talk about that specific thing about drafting there with the two different sides. I want to talk about that in just a second here. But maybe just to cap this one off, because you were absolutely right that your team has had the shortest player pool, and that's probably also, if we're being honest, what made the semifinals scheduling so difficult. And again, I never blamed any of you guys I'm not saying you did a bad job showing up if there's only literally 3 or 4 people on your team that can even play. So again, in that regard, why it would be more difficult. But then still, I would say that's all fair and well. But when you actually ended up being able to field lineups, you still especially here in the latest games, it was pretty much always you, Halu, and Riva, then with SDN mixed in during the group stage as well. So still, I was just a bit surprised that your team ended up actually having such a good usage rate despite the record being, well, it's not even, you're like 1 or 2 games behind the other teams if we add all the records together. So it's nothing crazy. But I just found that interesting that actually the team with the best usage rate had the best record. And my personal opinion, because that's just something that you haven't mentioned there, but my personal opinion, what that comes down to is actually probably to the biggest in the biggest part due to player picks, and I don't even think Riva did a necessarily bad job. It's just he was forced to first pick Halu, right? When he was drafting in Halu's stead. And I mean, that's not a bad pick. But then he didn't get to pick for like 4 picks or something like that. Yeah, Anti and Obi both had 2 more picks before Riva got to make his second one. So even though it sounds good when I'm saying yeah, your top 3 players played all the time, in reality, your third pick especially, right, which is you actually, your third best player, uh, is just picked so much later than the other team's top players that it's a bit difficult to compare. And I think that's actually the issue there. It's not your team just had a very difficult task, or Riva had a difficult task at his hands selecting the players for your team. just because I don't think his drafting spot was very advantageous. So I think that's mainly what I chalk it up to. And again, it's not like there was a huge gap between your team and the other teams. It's just 1 or 2 victories that ended up, putting you guys in last place here. But as you said, dude, with the early flips, you still cost these other guys so many games, and that was hilarious too. But yeah, anything maybe to close off like this segment specific to your team? Is there anything you'd like to any funny things about your team? Anything you would like to add at the end here? What from your guys' tournament run?
Mm, well, yeah, the draft kind of surprised me. Just the way it was done overall. Like I think some players were maybe ranked higher than they should have been. Maybe some were picked later than I would have expected. Like Kismich, I thought has clearly been very good in MPT lately, and it's like especially he's a very aggressive player, which I think was pretty clear was going to be good for this tournament. Uh, so
Well,
yeah, I was surprised he was taken so late. I probably would have wanted him on our team since given the availability.
oh,
And obviously, once we switched to that format with the scheduling, where it's like these are the times, and either you can make it or you can't. Having a pretty short team roster definitely screwed us a bit there.
dude, that's perfect that you end up mentioning that. That's exactly the transition I wanted to make. Because now, disregarding the fact that your team, of course, was hit the hardest by this shift, right? When we moved from me setting the dates and making sure everybody could play, when we shifted away from that to me just putting a date out there and forcing the teams to field any lineup they could. When we shifted there, of course, your team had the biggest disadvantage just due to pure availability at this point in the tourney. But I still wanted to just get your personal opinion on that because that change was something that was requested quite a bit. People just said maybe try this out and see if how this goes. Put teams in charge of assembling their players so they can actually control. The captains can control who's playing for them, and it's a bit more. Yeah, the agency is a bit more on the team side in that regard. So I wanted to get your personal opinion beyond the fact that, of course, in this tournament specifically, it was a disadvantage for your team. But just as a player, how did it feel from making everything or setting all the giving all your availability to me and then me planning it out? How did it feel different from this new approach that we actually ended up going with here for the playoffs?
Um, I mean, I think long term it's probably a better way to do things, but yeah, I think it wasn't totally clear to us how it was going to work.
Yeah, that's
And
fair.
there was definitely some miscommunication that went on that led to us forfeiting. Uh, we, yeah, I mean, the logistical overhead of this tournament is insane, and yeah, I can't even imagine how much effort you put into it. Even on my team, where our main ones are Reaver, Halu, and me. Okay, due to the convenience of daylight savings time, Halu happens to be pretty close to me in time zone right now. But SDN's the fourth. He's in Europe, and then Reaver's in Eastern Australia. So it's pretty mad, really, trying to find a time when we can all play at. Uh,
Exactly, and that's the thing, right? Because I tried two approaches to this now where I would gauge the availability from all teams and then talk to every single player individually, trying to find a time that works for everybody, or at least for 3 players from 2 teams that were roughly comparable in skill. So I tried that first, and then I tried the second approach, right, of just putting the teams in charge and seeing, well, I just selecting one time and then seeing what the teams could do with that. And honestly, I was kind of positively surprised actually. Of course, it was, and that's something I expected. It wasn't entirely clear how it was supposed to go, and there were other factors that contributed to it being a little bit of a mess here for the semifinals. But honestly, I guess if we had maybe 2 more players on your team, if every team had 6 active players, no matter their time zones, basically. I feel like this could have worked out really well, actually. And especially when you have a captain who's like super involved, who's online every day, who's and he and the team both use their group chat actively, if they even have a group chat. I don't know if every team ended up making one. But I'm just saying, right? If that's the fact where you've got a committed captain and you've got 5 to 6 active players on every team, in that case, I feel like that system that we used here for the playoffs might actually be pretty cool. Not because I want to save the work, because like honestly, I also enjoy doing the work, and I feel safe when I'm the one, of course, planning it all right. I know what's going on. I always have clarity of when we're playing, when we can't play. It puts the control in my hand, but I felt actually quite cool about this new approach here, where it was more on the team side, and it was. I feel like it's a good thing in general in tournaments when the organizer is as invisible as possible. So I feel like that is something that can actually work out if the captains have a lot of time to commit themselves to it, and if they've got enough players, which definitely was you guys' biggest problem. No matter if people want to accuse Halu of being lazy or something, I don't know. He was pretty committed on that last weekend. There on these 2 last weekends, I can tell you that. But the thing is, yeah, you guys just didn't have the players, so I feel like actually it could have worked out really well. Was there a real difference to you personally? Like, did you feel like it was easier for you or more comfortable for you to get games in the first or in the second system, or was it kind of the same for you? Or what would you say personally from your own experience?
Hmm. I mean, obviously, if you can just say, okay, these are all the times I'm free, that's nice. But, then you are thinking of like, what are like literally all of the times that I'm free? And then you're like intersecting everything that someone sent you, which is kind of crazy. Uh, I think like for future, like having a list of posted times is good, especially before the tournament. I guess people can see when the times are going to be, and they can use that to determine if they can play.
True.
Uh, Maybe some sort of compromise where you have like more slots than you need, and then if a team really can't make some slot, it's okay. Like you can skip that one.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, like even with 6 players, like I don't know if three if 3 of them are in Europe and it's like a game that's 2 a.m. in the morning there, then
Oh yeah.
I think Rico, what Zardoz or Rico were on vacation at some point, and then like one game was like okay, too late for SDN. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a struggle. I see that definitely. And you mentioned this thing about like being able to maybe not have to actually play every single slot. And I'm not sure if you saw this, but I announced the dates for the rest of the finals game yesterday in the Steam group. And I actually already made a rule like that, where I
Okay.
announced the games or the dates for games 3, 4, and 5, and I gave both teams the chance to just cancel one of those 3 games without being assigned a loss. They have to say by tomorrow. They have to tell me if they actually can't play that game and they want to cancel it, and then they can cancel that game without punishment. So I feel like you had a good idea there, and I already tried to implement something like that. I feel like that is healthy, and whatever we've experienced and continue to experience at this tourney here with the scheduling is gonna be very valuable for the future ones, and yeah, I think I'm pretty optimistic here, and honestly, also gotta be honest, most of these people have been taking it really well when their team got a disadvantage at some point, or whatever. They felt like they got screwed by scheduling or whatever. After a day or two, most people have actually, or all people have actually been very reasonable about it, and that makes me optimistic going forward, to be honest. So I can appreciate that definitely. Um, okay, anything else about that scheduling thing that we haven't said? Otherwise, I don't know. I'd move on.
No, I don't think there's anything more to say.
No, I
Yeah,
think
it was a bit tough to have that change in the middle of the tournament. And I guess if we'd known, like we would have drafted differently, hopefully, if we'd known at the start.
okay, that's fair enough. So I guess that's a good thing to be as to give the players as much information about what to expect from the tournament as possible, right, before they sign up. That's something I'd look to do definitely when I know what I'm doing. Okay, so enough talk about that side of the tourney. Now I want to hit two last topics here. First of all is, as I already teased earlier, the drafting aspect of the game, and we don't have to cover everything, every single point here. We don't have to rank all the civs and whatever. I've got some observations that I made, and then maybe you can just comment, how you feel about those, or maybe what were the biggest issues for you in draft. So first of all, I feel like the first draft round, right, the first two bands and then the first two picks, is kinda stale at this point. It's always either Tex or Inca band, then the Zulu band, then it's Tex or Inca first picked, and then it's most of the time Sumeria as the second pick. That's been a trend for the last couple of games. It was established in the semifinals with you guys, actually. And it's been true in the finals as well. For all of playoffs, that's exactly how the first round has played out. And I'm not sure if that is optimal, but I at least got to point out that there is some flexibility there, right? Because it's the first pick team who gets to decide whether they want to ban Inca or Aztecs. And of course, as a consequence of that, which of those two civs they are going to get as the first pick. And then it's the second team who are just forced to ban Zulu, presumably, and give up that other civ. So there's a lot of agency for the first picking team at this point in the draft. And basically with the current system, if this continues on, where it's just always Tex or Inca versus Sumeria handshake, I feel like you're just handshaking, losing drafts on the right side every single time if you're doing that. At least it has appeared so, because the Aztecs are just winning every single game, and that is not an exaggeration. That is what's going on right now. And giving over the Incans feels probably just as bad. They're an early aggression civ who's also even agricultural, so it just sounds like an absolute nightmare there. So maybe on this, that's the first part of draft I want to hit on. In this first round of draft, do you feel like there's maybe some adaptation, some optimization to be made? And for you personally, I know that maybe for good reason or not, you haven't always felt that excited about the Sumeria pick on the right side. So what's your thought there? Are people not exploiting this phase of the draft enough, especially on the second pick side, or is there just nothing that a second pick team can do?
I mean, it's tough to be the second pick. I feel like there's some sort of exponential effect where, like, 3v2, but like 3 squared versus 2 squared is like 9v4. Like, there's some sort of like, it feels like you keep getting hammered during that draft and ban when you're the second team. And yeah, like, I don't know, Sumer I think was overrated. Personally, I don't think I'm very good with Sumer. I think that was true in the last tournament, in the Hunger Games tournament, but it was also true in this tournament. I mean, obviously the Zulu are really good, so yeah, it makes sense to ban them. But I did feel like things got a bit stale. I felt like we were going through the same exact logical deduction process for the ban, like many games in a row. I think maybe like a random auto ban or something to encourage people to play different civs throughout the series, at least, I think would be interesting, because I think there were, I don't know how many games we played with Reaver on Egypt, me on Sumer, and Halu on Iroquois. Just seem to always come back to that.
It feels like it's every game, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, honestly, I agree totally that if there's nothing, if that's just how the tourney is going to play out, and people don't find a way to get any edges on the right side, on the second pick side, we've of course got to change something there. And the draft system in the Hunger Games tourney, especially where within series you could only pick each civ once, I feel like that made for a very interesting for a very interesting scenario, right? Because you could pick the Zulu and maybe they were OP, but actually you could only pick them once per series for every team. So you still got interesting variants of drafts, and people had to decide when to use their Zulu game and whatever. So and of course Zulu was still the highest win rate Civ in the tourney, in that Hunger Games tourney. Well, at least it was one of the highest. Sumeria was actually even higher up there. So you can see right there was some interesting strategy there. Maybe that system was better, and the only reason that I didn't use it, by the way, because I think that was a really cool system, having every Civ be usable once and then having to move on and find a different strategy. The only reason I went away from that is because you've got different players playing in each game in this tourney, right? Where in the Hunger Games it was always the same two players on each team, so that made it kind of fair in a sense. But maybe you get this, but I just felt like if you've got a strong lineup in game one and then a bad lineup in game two, those Civ picks that you pick in game one are then taken away from the other players that are playing in game two, and that felt a bit weird to me. But that wasn't even the biggest problem. The biggest problem was just that you don't have enough Civs. If a series goes to 5 games with 3 players on both sides, there's just simply not enough Civs to do this exact same rule. So maybe I could have used a variant of that. Maybe you can only use each Civ 2 times, for example. That could be a rule. Or I could mix it with bans and whatever. As you say, maybe a random element, although I'm not a big a fan of that. But still, you make a good point there that the Hunger Games draft actually felt pretty balanced to me. And I don't think there was that clear as a lopsided win rate for whoever got to pick first or second. So maybe there's something to be learned from that. So what I get from you is maybe you preferred that Hunger Games type drafting system. You felt it was more fair.
I think that this tournament had too much ban-in. I think it led to like the same civs being in every game and also missing out on like there's some civs we just never got to see because they always got banned.
Zulu.
Yeah, Zulu. I mean, there were some other ones though.
Yeah, well, that's other one. You're making a good point. The Zulu are the only ones that were banned every game in a literal sense. But there's Civs like the Scandinavians who looked super effective. They got a kill every game on average. They got one kill per game, and I think they've got 3 wins, 1 loss or something. And they've been banned like 80% of the time. So they kind of, I guess, fall in that same mold, is what you're saying.
I mean, I thought Scandinavians were kind of overrated. I don't know why everyone was in such a rush to ban them, although the 5 attack is pretty ridiculous. But they just seem very counterable. And like you should anticipate what's coming, but somehow people didn't. I don't know.
Okay. I mean, maybe
That's true of the aspects too.
You're saying that, and I hear that a lot of the time. Like this Civ is overrated, this Civ is underrated, and people keep theorizing about how they theoretically should be played against or whatever. It's just again like the Aztecs, for example, they have never lost a game so far, and the Scandinavians are the ones with the highest kill average per game. I'm not saying stats are everything, except especially with this lower sample size. But I mean, I don't know. It looked pretty effective to me in those games. Scandinavia, especially. I wouldn't say they're like a super high tier Civ, but they're also just never. Maybe that's actually just proves your point actually, because you're saying that maybe Scandinavia isn't even that great, but they still get banned out every time, and that's not because like they're super OP, but they're always banned in the second or third round of bans, right? So if you're saying there's just too many bans, you don't need those bans down there, and Scandinavia is always getting banned despite being overrated or whatever. Maybe that actually just proves your point in saying that, hey, maybe we should strip those bans down a bit, and that would actually increase Civ variety, or at least the possible selections that teams can make. Because I guess at the end of the draft, if your only left remaining options are like Egypt, and then the 3 shitter civs that nobody wants to pick, Greece, Byzantines, whatever. I mean, at that point, maybe it's a bit boring, and you're actually right. Maybe a round of bans less would have actually been quite healthy for this tournament. Good point. I hadn't really considered how how much the number of bans actually, limited the different the amount of strategies you could pull out. And before we want to, by the way, before we want to leave this topic entirely, I want to just throw one other thing at you, because I've just focused mainly on the first round of drafts here. And by the way, I still believe people should try leaving up the Zulu ones. It's not been proven that they are as OP as they seem in the 3v3, so I want to see that once before I buy it. Aztecs definitely may be worth trading for them if you've got the right players, but that's just my opinion. I just want to throw out one more thing there. The second round of draft is also quite stale, quite figured out, but not in the same sense that we always see the same three civs there. But the trend is typically that in the second round, it's all about the aggressives, right? You see from the first round how many aggressives are still remaining. Typically, it's 3 of them, right? Because only the Incans are banned or picked at that point. And then people start, bargaining with these aggressives. Right? They're thinking, okay, do we leave all of them up? Do we try to ban most of them out? Which side ends up getting how many aggro picks? And my personal opinion is that actually aggressives are a little bit overrated at this stage in the draft. Because one, the Celts, if the Celts are the only aggressive that you get out of your draft, that's not worth prioritizing over anything else, especially if that means the Celts ruin your comp, because maybe you've got 2 swordsmen upgrading civs, and the Celts aren't even that good in that regard, I don't think. But also the Celts just haven't been able to make work in this tournament. So I feel like if the only thing you get out of the right side second round pick there is the Celts pick, and taking that aggressive away from your opponent, I feel like that's too little. And combined with that, I think Rome is the one civ that is definitely underrated at this stage. I feel like people shouldn't default to just banning or picking the aggressives when available at this stage in the draft, but they should really consider, depending on what they and the enemy has picked in the first round, I feel like they should really consider prioritizing Rome over any more aggressives at this stage in the draft. And I'm not sure if you remember this. That actually happened once and only once in this tourney so far. It was your very last game. That last game in the semifinals there, where your team. Oh no, I'm sorry. I got that wrong. I got that wrong. It was the first finals game. It was the first finals game where actually Rome got picked in the second rotation, although the Iroquois were still up and able to be picked. And that team who ended up picking Rome instead of an aggressive that they could have picked there ended up winning that game. So I want to see people do that more. I want to see people prioritize Rome over aggressives if Rome just fits their composition better. So what's your take on that? In the second round of draft, especially if you're on, well, it doesn't even matter on which side you're on. Do you think aggressive is just the must pick every time, or are there other picks, most of all Rome, but maybe even some other choices that you would prioritize higher there to maybe bring some new dynamic into this second pick rotation? Any take there?
I think Rome usually works out better. I think Rome's like, well, I mean, we wanted them. I think the last 2 games of the semifinals, but because we picked second, we had to ban them because otherwise we were worried the other team would take them.
Yeah, I see.
I mean, because I mean the trait's just like, do you have numbers on like how often did the Celts actually get their agricultural bonus?
Well, I
Like
know
how
that they've been picked 10 times and lost all those 10 games. And
often?
from memory, just going off memory, I'm pretty sure it was they should have been on freshwater 7 or 8 of those times. Definitely. So it's not like they've just constantly been screwed out of freshwater. That I'm pretty sure that they've almost alwast had it.
Yeah. I mean, industrious and like bonus food or floodplains is almost as good as agricultural, or sometimes better. Like it's just Rome is just way more flexible.
I agree.
Uh,
Definitely agreed, yeah.
and yeah, we had to ban it because it was like gonna be okay, their weakest player is gonna get Rome, and if they get Rome, then we can't kill them. So gotta ban it.
That's big. I'm not sure if there's actually another Civ in this tournament that is so unkillable while it's still having so high kill pressure. I don't think that's like they're like the ultimate two-way player. I don't know that they're like the Kawhi Leonard of our draft. I don't know. Maybe that's a bad comparison. I'm not American, but still, like that's what I'm feeling. Is there another Sith that's so good on both ends where you can't ever kill them if they have iron, but they also are like so deadly on offense too? Do you think there's anything comparable on both ends?
I mean, I think Zulu and Sumer in the early stages of the game.
Oh, fair
Sumer
enough.
often gets kills just because of the situations they force people into, and if they choose to archer stack along with their anks. And then yeah, Zulu is just always the same thing. You know, they got that 2 defense and they force people into crazy positions where they kill them with one-on-ones or take out their roads while the archers kill them. Or yeah,
I can see that. Yeah, those are, but as you just mentioned, those are like the highest tier picks in the tourney overall. So Rome being compared to those is pretty significant, I'd say. I'm not, and again, I'm not saying that you should first pick Rome like in the first rotation or anything. I'm just saying like teams probably should consider them. As you just said, you felt very pressured by them being left up, and then even in a not so good player's hands, you just don't want to give them over. And the stats are proving you right in that regard too. And you're right as well. Rome and Celts, they both need iron, but Rome doesn't need the fresh water. So although you get fresh water in like 80-90% of the spawns in this tourney, it's not guaranteed. So maybe actually they are the safer pick in some regards. So I guess, yeah, Rome. And I mean, I guess I'm just preaching to the choir here because I know your team has been on the Rome hype train pretty much since you came in. But I find that's an interesting one. Is there any other Sith, by the way, maybe just off the top of your head, is there any other Sith that compares with those, yeah, with the aggressives? Other than, of course, Aztecs and Sumeria, which we are already picking in the first round.
I think Japan was underrated in this tournament. I think in the game where I was Sumer and Obi was Japan and he killed me, he showed why they're so deadly.
Okay.
Uh,
What?
especially the join worker strat was interesting. I don't know if that's actually optimal or not. Maybe you should like
Archriver's pioneered that, and I don't know. I've not done the math on that. I think there's spots for it, but fair. That is an interesting strategy for sure. I want to maybe get a little bit more precise there, because what you're saying Japan's underrated and Obi was able to use them so well. I'm sure you've heard of this stat at this point, but Japan has this crazy win rate where it's like I think it's like 4 wins and 6 losses or something like that. Actually, let me just get it
Mm.
right. I have it right here. It's yeah 4 and 6, and Obi's got 3 of those 4 wins and only one of those 6 losses. So basically, in his hands, it's a top tier Civ, and everybody else is almost always losing with them. But you're saying actually that they maybe they just were misutilized, I guess. And what exactly is it that Obi does or that the Civ does that you think is so good at? I don't know what's so deadly about them.
I think if you're good at micro, if you understand how to get the most out of what your cities are producing, then Japan is insane because you can produce a 2 attack unit for 8 shields. And I'm guessing, like when Obi attacked me, his stack was like half samurai. He didn't just build one to get his GA and then try to do swords and archers. Uh, he, I'm sure, built a samurai if the city had 8 shields and built an archer if it had 10, and then that was his stack. And I'm sure he switched cities from one to the other as he was growing or if he wanted to build a worker or something. Whereas I'm guessing that some other like weaker players maybe didn't really capitalize on that because to me that's just like very very useful. Like it's just crazy
No,
that you can.
you're absolutely. I mean, this sounds like I paid you to say this probably, because that's like what I've been saying the entire time, and people keep telling me Japan isn't good. Japan is, I don't know, it's just a gimmicky Civ, but Samurai actually doesn't do anything or whatever. I hear that a lot, but you basically you've just exactly summarized my argument. I've done the math on stream the other day. In situations where one guy makes a stack of 16 archers. Japan, if microing perfectly, Japan can make a stack of 8 archers and 10 samurai. So you get 2 extra units in there, in that type of stack with the same exact stats minus the defensive bombard, which I don't think it makes that big a difference, right? If you've got a stack with 8 archers underneath, it's very rare that somebody's gonna attack into that. So I definitely there is situations where it does matter. I'm just saying that exactly what you've just said. If you're microing that actually perfectly, and I know that from my own experience in MPT, there's tons of times where even if I don't put the time into micro my cities because I don't know, lazy, even if I don't do that, so many times I've got like 4 shields in a city, and that always feels horrible, right? You've got to micro it, otherwise having a 4 shield per turn city, what do you do with that? You can't do a warrior with it. And if you do a spearman or an archer, there's still a lot of waste. So you've always got to micro it. Otherwise, it's just so much waste. But the samurai is a good, is a great actually fit for that. Perfect, of course, with the A shield cost. So yeah, thanks for I guess agreeing with me there. Without we haven't talked about that beforehand, of course, but it's still funny that you're basically just echoing my sentiment about Japan. But interesting. I've never heard somebody actually put them into this second round draft tier thing. But I guess Obi's without I haven't spoken to him, but I guess he's of the same opinion because he's of course been picking them and pretty early too. So I guess he agrees with you in that regard as well. But interesting.
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
the game where I beat him, Sumer versus Japan, which is bringing down the stats, like he would have lived if he just control shift G'd. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
It
That's his
wasn't
only
anything.
loss. Yeah, that is it. And that should have eliminated him, right? At that point, we thought that was it for him in the tourney. Uh,
Yeah,
right?
would have
That would have
felt.
been so. That was the storyline. I should really have stuck to that. I should have made it so the undefeated Japan players, the only one who's able to win on the CIV, he picks it in the final game, and then yeah, he loses on it, he throws it, and he's out. That would have been the anime storyline there. Uh, didn't end up happening that way. I'm sorry for you guys there to poop your party, but nah, you're actually right. You are the one who brought him down there with the win rate. Although it was of course super gimmicky, it didn't matter, right? That could have been any other CIV at this point. He didn't die because he was Japan or anything. So
Yeah.
yeah, no. So I guess pretty unfortunate that that was the one that actually ended up ruining his stats as well. All right, I've got one last topic here to briefly touch on, and I'm not sure if you're in a hurry, we can cut this short as well. But
That's fine.
great. So the last thing is just logically the state of the finals. Now we've played 2 games in the finals, and it's of course at 1-1. Both teams have won a game, and his team still have the side choice advantage. If you're again, we've already emphasized in this episode how important it is to have side choice to be able to pick first in the draft. But even for people who can't relate, that's like having like home court advantage in a series in the NBA or something, right? Where you always have that in the back of your mind that at least we can play more games than our opponent in our own stadium. And that's the kind of the same thing here, right? It just boosts your chance of winning to have that first pick. And that's with Anti in this series. His team has won the first game where they had the side choice, and they've lost the second game where Obi had the side choice. So we've got 3 games remaining, 2 of which Anti's team has the side choice. Starting with this third game that's going to be played on Friday, of course. And yeah, well, so what happened in the finals basically was in game 1, Obi had a way weaker lineup and ended up losing, unsurprisingly. And in game 2, Obi had a slightly stronger lineup, but both teams had competent players on the floor or on the on the map, I guess. So it was 2 competent lineups with Obi having the edge there. So he ended up taking that win in that second game, although it was definitely closer. So basically, this is a pretty open-ended question, but it's just, yeah, what are your thoughts from what you've seen in these 2 final games, and combining that, of course, with ultimately, who do you think is gonna take the finals? What do you think? Who's favored at this point? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would think that Obi's team would be more likely to win. They were definitely the ones that we were more scared of. I think that maybe if you like average out the rank on the ladder or something, Anti's team is higher. But I think Obi's team has the stronger players and the players who are more like their top players, the players that are more adaptable to the tournament, to like the specific map setup. I think yeah, they'll change their play more to be optimal. What the first game? Yeah, I mean the first game they just had a weak lineup. Like uh not great play. You can see my comments on your Twitch stream, I guess, about what I thought of some of the early moves there.
Yeah, it's not
But
even hating, right? It's not hating. It's just they are just supposed to be worse players as well, right? If you look on the ladder, so fair enough.
yeah, yeah, no, I'm not hating. Just just like very odd decision making. Uh, and and the second game, yeah, I guess that game was kind of a toss up. Like either team could have won very easily. Uh, what was it? Archreaver got very I wasn't Anti got very unlucky with his landing. That like if he'd picked the other city, maybe he would have killed.
Yeah.
Uh, Rabdag got away with being caught totally with his pants down.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and then yeah, I don't know. And then yeah, I guess Elk didn't really make the best decisions in city placement and worker moves and things. But you know, I would say that like even with the first pick disparity, I would back Obi's team to win it if they have their top players.
That's crazy to me, and it's not crazy in the sense that it's outrageous to believe that, but it's incredibly surprising because I feel like just a couple of things that to play devil's advocate here and to back what would make Anti's team more likely. You've already emphasized how much side choice matters, and they've got it in 2 or 3 games, which would be enough to win the finals, of course. Then you've emphasized how much strength of lineup matters, and that is controversial because actually, if you look at the two lineups there, the first game was basically won due to the better players being available on Team Anti. But honestly, for Team Anti, Cheese and Hein are his first 2 picks of the draft, and I'm very skeptical that they're gonna play in the during over the course of these finals. They haven't played in the first 2 games, and I'm just skeptical that they're gonna be able to play. So Team Anti's got huge issues there. However, they've got Kismic, who you already said that he was quite underrated there in the draft and picked way later than most would have expected. And the opposite of him, in my opinion, is Sanjay on Team Obi, who was picked. He wasn't picked like super early, but he was picked quite early by Obi. And the reasoning for that was at the time when we were drafting the players, he had barely played any MPT games. He was a returning veteran, so people just banked on him kind of getting back into his groove and ending up being a solid player. And you can debate of how good you can debate how good a player he actually is, but just a plain look at the ladder will tell you he's not been dominating the ladder games for one reason or another, right? He's been having a tough time on the ladder, so he's kind of like the opposite to Kismic there, someone that was gambled on in draft over somebody like a Kismic and who hasn't really panned out, at least not in terms of his ladder rank. And a quick look at his win rate in this tourney is, yeah, he's won 1 game and he's lost 3. Of course, I'm not putting that responsibility on him alone, just silly, but I'm just saying, maybe in terms of lineup, it's a bit of a toss up there. And then one last thing that in my opinion makes Team Anti just look good is they won the series in the group, right? They won in the group stage 3-1. Of course, Cheese played most of his games, I believe, so maybe that's the deciding factor there. But I'm just saying they in the group stage they actually came in ahead in that series. But I also understand what you said there, that Team Obi is the scarier one because exactly during this group stage, your team actually ended up performing generally better against Team Anti. So I completely understand why you would probably feel that way. In that maybe Obi's team actually is the scarier one. Again, that's just the first time I've heard it. But actually, now that you said it, and now that we've looked a bit at the reasons for one way or the other, it sounds quite reasonable to predict Obi's team here. Actually, I'm not sure if I'm willing to go that far. If I'm willing to put them as the favorites, but I do believe that it's probably most likely of all, since your team isn't involved anymore and there's nobody hitting enemy cities 1 versus 1 by turn 10 every game. I feel like it's pretty much not going to be determined by RNG or by early risky plays anymore, but more so by schedule availability. And in that regard, it's really hard to predict, right? You never know who's available. If Cheese or Hein end up being available more often than it has been the case lately, and if maybe Archreaver misses a day or something, who knows how it goes. That's an interesting thing to look at for sure. I feel like scheduling and availability is going to play a big factor there. And interesting that you've gone with Team Obi. Oh yeah, maybe one thing that I've forgotten there about Team Obi. You mentioned that what was it? You mentioned that their play styles were like good for the tourney, or you said like they were adaptable to the tournament or something. What was your point in there that you made?
Yeah, like I think players like Obi and Rabdag in particular are very creative and will adapt to the meta. They'll figure out the meta given the situation. Whereas, some other players will just try to play like it's normal MPT, or they'll try to use the same style for every map, regardless of their civ and regardless of the way the map looks. And yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I would probably say that like Obi and Rabdag are the top players in this tournament, and why I would favor their team to win.
Okay, fair point. I don't think that's a crazy opinion to have. It's interesting because Archreaver, of course, was also one of the guys that overperformed expectations in the Hunger Games tournament, right? So he's probably also suited well just for this type of map, this type of environment. So I guess I see your point there for sure. I'm not saying, because the thing is, you use the word adaptable, and the number one criticism by Rapdeck haters is that he's not adaptable and he's just always playing for rush. And it still makes sense, your point, right? Because your point was that it's adaptable to the tourney meta, or basically they are just able to play the tourney meta well. And Rapdeck is the craziest, the craziest, he has the craziest stats of all people in that regard, where he's played 9 games just as you, but he's been getting the first pick, the number 1 pick of his team, 8 of those 9 games. I mean, it's not a huge mystery as to why that is. It's just always because they pick Incans or Aztecs first, and they put him on that Russia civ, and he just ends up causing chaos on the map with that. And you've called him creative. Maybe that's the good word to describe him with here, because that's just exactly what he's been doing. He's been getting creative with these Russia civs and just getting on people's nerves. And then when he's playing alongside Obi, especially, who's just, I guess a solid carry player, right? He's just a scary MPT player, number 1 on the ladder. And who's gonna argue that? I guess that's just a match made in heaven in that regard. And then when you've got Archreaver on the map at the same point, and he's been traditionally getting the last pick of their team, and you've got such a good player as well, like a top 10-ish player, ranked 11, 12, taking the 3rd pick and still making that work and playing well to the tournament. I guess that sounds like a pretty deadly combo there. So I can get behind the hype. Maybe they actually should be favored. Although I'll make a compromise here. I'll give him the prediction here, but only if they're starting to implement the draft changes that I've that I've proposed here. If there's gonna start maybe in the game 5 where they have second pick or something like that, they gotta at some point throw a curveball there in draft, because I don't think they're gonna overcome the side selection uh, canyon here, the side selection rift. If they're not gonna, if they're just gonna follow the same protocols that teams before them have done. So I think they need to maybe make some Zulu shenanigans and leave them open, or try to mix something up in the second round, as we said, prioritizing Rome or Japan over the aggressives. If they manage to throw a curveball like that, I think they're in a pretty good spot and they can make it work. I have trust in them for that. They're also pretty good at strategizing and everything. So you actually partially have convinced me here. Again, if everything goes as it has been over the last few games, I'm sticking with Team Anti. But if Team Obi ends up throwing a curveball there in a possible game 5, maybe, yeah, I'm on your side and on their side there in that case. All right, that about does it for the topics that I've noted for today. Is there anything about any of these topics or any other topic, anything you've still got on your mind that you want to comment on here? Any final thoughts?
Not really. I mean, I think you covered a lot of things. Yeah, I don't know. It's
Yep,
been a fun tournament. I think one thing I would say, yeah, let's maybe spending less time in the drafting stages. I don't know if we can do it async before the match or something.
that has
But
been tried in some instances.
okay.
It hasn't. It has never worked where we've been able to complete a full draft before a game actually started. Even sometimes we started it on the day before. I started messaging, "Hey, make your first pick, and I'll pass it on to the other captain," and stuff like that. Uh, it hasn't worked doing it before, so maybe we would have to change something in the protocol for that in order to make it more, yeah, in order to make it a bit better. Because you're absolutely right. Just starting 45 minutes after the scheduled time is a bit, yeah, it's a bit time consuming and a bit disrespectful to all the participants' time. Good point there. I'll note that down right now, actually. And yeah, anything else? Anything left you've wanted to comment on?
I noticed the maps got a bit bigger. Did you do that to counter the early kills, making the games very short?
Bigger in terms of more spaced out on the.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Do you have a specific point in mind from which on the maps got bigger? Like, do you mean in the finals only, or?
Like the last 3 games have been pretty large maps, I would say.
Okay, let me take just a very quick look here.
Maybe all but one of the semifinal games, except for the semifinal game that I played against Obi where I killed him. I think all the other ones were pretty big maps.
Okay, I guess. Yeah. There's definitely. Well, okay. I don't want to spoil anything at all about the next 3 maps or the next 3 games, so I'm not gonna give a super specific answer here. Because I mean that's bullshit, right? If I just start talking about giving away info about the maps now at the end of the tourney. But now for the past maps that I've played, it's just in a way where the distance between civs or the distance to the closest enemy is typically always 9 or 10 tiles. That's on every map. It's always like maybe 8 at some points. But the closest enemy is typically always 8, 9, 10 tiles away. But the way it ends up actually affecting the gameplay, due to the way in which the enemies and your teammates are positioned around the map, makes it just feel so much different, right? And the ultimate example is like the ring map, right? When on those ring type maps where you've got 2 enemies on both of your flanks, it feels like you don't have any teammates on the map, right? They're so far away. And then there's those other maps where you've got your teammates both on the sides of you, super close together, and then the enemy 3 are also super close together, and it's just front line versus front line. Those types of maps feel super narrow. So I get what you're saying. There's definitely a way different feel to the maps, and some maps have way bigger landmass than others. But no, that is not something that I've done on purpose. In fact, the maps that I've used in this final now. Um, Oh no, not in the final. In the last 3 games, so including your last game, the first 2 finals games, 2 of these 3 maps are some of the oldest in the entire tournament. That's just maps that I've made at the pretty much at the start of the tourney or at some point in the early days of the tourney, and it didn't happen to use them so far. So that was that. If that was your observation, it's not to counteract your team's crazy coin flipping in the early turns. Although I might have to do that if I end up inviting you guys to another tournament, just so there's more gameplay time to actually comment on. But no, interesting observation though. All right. I guess we can close it out at this point. I'll leave the final thoughts to you, maybe.
Yeah, nothing more to add. Thanks for hosting the tournament. Thanks for having me on.
No, thanks. All right. Thanks for guesting here as well. And then thanks to the viewers, of course, for tuning in. We're at the 1 hour mark here. It went quite a bit longer than I actually had expected. I didn't have that many topics, but I hope it was still a pleasant listen and a pleasant conversation here for everybody involved. So thanks to our viewers. We cut it here, and I hope all of you tune into the final stream here on Friday, on Saturday as well. Keep your eyes on the Discord and on the Steam group, where I will post the exact same times once more for everybody interested in watching. I put a comment down in the comment section of the YouTube video as well, actually, so make sure not to miss these last 2 or 3 final games between Team Obi and Team Anti, and make sure to let us know who you're backing, and if we're just full of crap in this episode and we don't know what we're talking about, let us know in the comment section as well. Thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you guys on the finals stream.